So hi guys, welcome to my next video. So we've done priming, we've done some painting, and obviously we need to clean the airbrush once we've finished. Now I will explain, I'm going to be cleaning a clean airbrush. The reason for that is I did already film this, and I think some of you know what I'm going to say here. I forgot to hit the mute button or the unmute button, so I recorded a big long video on how to clean an airbrush with no speech. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo it all again, but obviously I've got a clean airbrush, but hopefully that won't make too much difference. So hi guys, so I have definitely remembered to hit the unmute button now. So I have my airbrush, which for the purpose of this video we're going to pretend is full of paint. So what we're going to do is we're going to be doing two cleans. One is going to be what I call a battle clean, and one is going to be a full strip down clean. It's just a comparison I made from when I was a cadet. You know, we were taught that there's two ways to clean a rifle, and I always regard this as your weapon. So when you're in the battlefield, you just clean your weapon down enough so that it functions nicely and it works. Once you get back to barracks or somewhere safe, you can do the full strip down and clean, taking all the little bits apart, and you can just make sure it's 100% working condition. So I'm also going to use, I'm going to call it a 1, 2, 3, 2, 1 method. 1 being water, 2 being thinners, and 3 being cleaners. And then I'm also possibly going to be using a proper manufactured cleaner. Now by choice I make my own thinners and my own cleaners, and these do the job very well 99% of the time. Sometimes I just need a little bit of a boost with the cleaner, which is why I have this. This cost me about 50p a litre, this cost me about 30p a litre, this cost me about £10 a litre. So as you see, I don't want to use this. I actually buy this by the litre. This came with my airbrush, and it's a nice, really handy little bottle. So when it runs out, I buy a litre, and then I just top this up. But I'm going to try not to use this, and if I don't, well, I won't use it because the airbrush is clean, but I'll tell you at what point I would use this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of as much of the paint as we can in the airbrush. So we're going to pretend that's gone. If you've got an excessive amount, you can always just tip it out onto a kitchen roll or some way, but spray out pot's always good because it just keeps everything clean. So what we're going to do, I'll tell you what we'll do. I don't want to muck up the brushes. Right, so I told you in another video that I buy these brushes from Poundland. You actually get a pack of them, and they look, you might get, I think you get a couple of these and about 3 of these and 2 of these, and they're really handy because they're different sizes and different colours. So the yellow I use for mixing paint, so that's no good for this video. The red ones, as you see, that's a bit scabbier, and that's because I use it for cleaning, and then I use this for cleaning as well. So what I'll do now is I've got as much paint as I can out using just the airbrush, and what I'll try and do is fill this maybe half full, 1/3 full with water, and I'll get my brush in, and we'll just mix as much of that paint through as we can. We're just going to dilute it so that there's not so much paint there, and I'm using the water because it's cheaper than thinners. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spray some of that through, and then we can always put our finger on the end. Now I learned a lot from a chap on YouTube called Next Level Painting, and he mixes a lot of paints this way, and he calls it gumbo mix, and I just like the name. So we're going to do a little bit of a gumbo mix, and by putting our finger over the end of the airbrush and then pulling back on the paint, because the paint can't get through, or the contents of this cup, it's going to force it back up, and you'll see you get bubbles. Don't do it so much that the bubbles fly out, just a little bit, and what it's doing is it's pushing it down the nozzle and back up again, and it just gives us a little bit of a mix, and then we'll just blow that all through. And then that would have got most of the paint through. So next up, we're going to about 1/3 of a cup. Depends how much paint you've got in there. We're going to put the thinners in, and the thinners are going to do most of the cleaning, because it's just going to thin that paint down really nice and hopefully get rid of it. And then we're going to do the same again. A little bit of a gumbo mix there, and we're just going to blow that thinners all the way through. And that's your stage 2, so 1, 2. For some reason, my thinner seems to go through slower. I don't know why. Maybe I bought extra thick alcohol or something. There we go. Right, so next we want our cleaner. Now my cleaner has a bit of oil in it, so I just always have to give it a good mix. And the same again, about 1/3 of a cup. Give that a nice mix around. Get that in the bottom. Bit of a gumbo. And then we're going to blow that through. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go back through the stages. So we're first of all cleaning most of the paint out with the water. Then we're cleaning it properly with the thinners. Then we're cleaning it with the cleaners. Now what we're doing is we're going to use thinners to help us get rid of the cleaners, and then we're going to use the water to get rid of the cleaners. So about 1/3 of a cup, but not as much as you put in before. You only need a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a bit of a not quite so bad, and just when those bubbles, we want to make sure that's clear. Okay, if it's not clear, we're going to run that through. If it's clear, we know we've got rid of all the paint. If it's not clear, we'll give it another go with a thinner. Maybe just put a tiny bit more in. Okay, and for the purposes of this video, we're going to assume that's not clear. So it's not clear the second time. So we'll run that through. And you can see now why I'm using cheaper thinners. Because the thinners and the cleaner for me are so cheap, I'll run extra through. So that's just about going through there now. So the paint was not clear. We've run the thinners through for the second time. So I'm going to go back up to stage 3, but this time I'm going to use the I'm going to call the cavalry in, so to speak. I'm just going to put about 3 or 4 drops in there, just enough just to cover. You see the needle at the bottom of the airbrush, just enough to cover that. But just pull that back a few times, no air, just the needle, and then we're going to do the gumbo mix, and then get that working in there, spray it through. Oh no, do you see the result there? Even though it was a clean airbrush, it's just made a difference. So go back to doing the thinners, have a look at that, and for the purpose of the video we'll say that that is absolutely clear, and that's managed to shift it. You can repeat this process as many times as you want. You're only using 3 or 4 drops at a time. You can also go back into this, and what you can also do is put your cleaners in and then leave it in for 5-10 minutes, give it a bit of time to work in. Anything alcohol based will work at acrylics. I've actually been in the past, I've actually forgotten to clean my airbrush out, left it for a couple of weeks, and it all dried in there, and I just left the cleaners in there for a while. and it just slowly works its way. So that's nice and clean. So now we're going to just fill that up, not fill it up, but put lots of water in there, and again checking that it's still clean. Can you see how that water is lovely and clear? And this is just to run the thinners through. So we're using the cleaners to clean it. The water in the thinners is saving us on the cleaner by getting most of the easy work done, and then we're using the thinners to strip out the cleaners, and then we're using the water to strip the thinners out, because if there's any thinner or cleaner left in there, it's going to affect our paint on our next paint job. So there is our nice clean, there's our nice clean airbrush. As you can see, it is far from perfect. Just going to take the thing off. So it's far from perfect. Look, I've got a bit of paint in the top there, and cosmetically it's absolutely filthy, but none of this external is going to affect the next paint. Have a look at your nozzle as well. If you think your nozzle's a little bit filthy, which that one absolutely is, you can always get yourself a cotton bud, get a little bit thinner. Thinners will do this job absolutely fine, and then what you can do is just clean your nozzle with your cotton bud, and just run your cotton bud in there, only if you want to, and look at that, it's like new, and then we can pop that back on. So that is your airbrush battle cleaned, ready for a change of paint. So I can just chuck the next paint in there and away I go. So guys, I'm going to do a camera cut. When I come back, you're going to see I'm going to do the full battle strip. Oh, one other thing I want to mention, this is an optional. I quite often store my airbrush in this. This is a sealable bottle. This is filled up with cleaner. This is exactly the same cleaner as this, but obviously there's a lot more of it. And what I might do is I'll just take this off. I'd have to take this bit off just to make it fit, but I can just dunk that straight in there. And I quite often do that if the common practice with a full strip down clean is that a lot of people will do that at the end of the day, and that's absolutely fine. If I'm perhaps having a late night session, I'll do some airbrush painting. I just want to get to bed when I'm finished. I know I'm going to be doing some painting in the morning. I might just dunk it. It's not advisable to leave it there long term, because as you will discover at some point, there's a little rubber O-ring in here, and what you do not want to do is damage that ring. So if you've got any harsh chemicals, which there isn't anything really seriously harsh in my cleaners, but there is, as you can see from my ingredients list, there's a little tiny bit of ammonia cleaner, and it can damage plastic. So you don't want to be soaking it long term, especially if this is a cheaper airbrush. So guys, I will see you in a moment when we will do the full strip down and clean. Okay guys, so welcome back. So you'll see I've got a few extra bits of equipment on the table. I'll go through everything as I need to do it. I'm not going to go through all the names of the components of the airbrush. We're just going to get in there and clean it. Now I'm going to be cleaning an Iwata airbrush, which is quite different from my Chinese airbrush, and it may well be different from your airbrush. However, the basics are all the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our handle off, and we're going to remove our nozzle. We're going to take this cap off. Before I do that, I want to just take this off. I have this little container, and this is in here is Medea airbrush cleaner, but as you can see, it's a little soak pot. It's just reusable, and it's very handy. And I also have, oh, my tweezers have gone missing. I have a pair of tweezers that I use just for airbrushing. Here we are, for airbrushes. There we go, I knew there was somewhere. Right, so I'll explain each piece of equipment as we come to it. Also, another thing I like about this pot is that it's quite handy. It has a little parts container. So I'm going to take this little nut off, and we're going to remove gently the needle. And you'll quite often see that there's little specks of paint on there. I'm also going to remove my nozzles, and I'm going to throw those in there, and they can sit in there for as long as we need to. Right, so this is the important bit. Do not damage this. Don't lose it. Don't let it roll off the table. If this bends, or anything happens to it, this is going to affect the majority of the performance of the airbrush. What I want to do here, and it is a major working component, so I will only use a good cleaner. I want to just get a couple of drops of this airbrush cleaner onto a cloth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a bit of a pull through. And what I'm doing, it's very difficult to get it precisely, but I'm feeling for any pull. If you get a nice smooth, if it's nice and smooth, it suggests there's no paint on it. And because of the way I'm holding, although this isn't the performance end, I do want to clean that. And then just run your fingers away from the tip. This is extremely sharp, you could stab yourself. So always run your finger this way and have a little feel. And that feels really, really smooth to me. Obviously I've been touching it, I've got a bit of grease on, so we'll just give it one more wipe. We'll run it through there, and I'm confident that needle is clean. So I'll put that there, and I know that's not going to run away. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to take these components out, and these are more function than the actual business end. And be careful, there's a spring in there. We're going to put these on here, and I like this because it's harder for them to run away, and if they do try to roll away, they'll be left in the pot. Now, this is where this differs from my Chinese airbrush. On my Chinese airbrush, these two aren't attached, so when you put the trigger in, you do have to sort of get that in there and wiggle it around. My Iwata airbrush is a little bit easier because it's attached. Right, so that is most of the airbrush shape. Now, this is a nozzle removal tool, and make sure you use this absolutely correctly. You'll see on the nozzle there's two little flat notches, and this nozzle remover is going to fit in there. Make sure that this is absolutely parallel with the airbrush, and we're going to very gently unscrew this. And there we go, and that's the nozzle. If you unscrew it at an angle, you're going to damage that, and this is surprising how expensive it is, and that's going to go in there. So now we're left with our airbrush. And what we're going to look at doing is just cleaning all of this out. So we'll get a little bit of cleaner. Just be aware that because there's no nozzle in there, if you let go, it's all going to pour out. So using variety of brushes and pipe cleaners and all sorts of bits and bobs. There we are. We're just going to clean that out, and we can use this. And we want to get in there and clean. We want to get. You see there where the needle goes. We want to get into there, get our pipe clean. It's not going to go all the way through, but give that a good scrub on the inside. You can see there's a little bit. It's on the whole, it's quite a clean brush, but just see there's a little bit of gunk in there. And then for the front end, I use one of these. This is like a dental. This actually came with my airbrush, funnily enough. But this is one of these dental, this is for cleaning teeth, believe it or not. and it's absolutely perfect for cleaning airbrushes. You see it's well worn, and this is going to go in through the front. It's just absolutely perfect. So we get in there. The only trouble is it's not long enough to reach there and poke all the way through, but we get scrubbing in there. And then I've got this set of brushes here. These are a little bit longer. You see they're getting a bit worn out now, but these will go in. Only one will fit into my airbrush, but this will come through all the way through, you see. And then I can use bigger brushes like this one. This is one of my favourite brushes, and we'll get in there and we'll get really in there and get all of that cleaned out. Okay, and then this is more cosmetic. Try and get all of that clean, all the mess we've made around the edges, and I like to try and get this looking like new. So I might want to use a pipe cleaner, it's up to you, however you want to get that out. And it will eventually come, especially using Medea airbrush cleaner. It will get rid of most. And then good old-fashioned kitchen roll to the rescue as well. That's going to be really difficult to get out. I think that's primer that I spilt on there about a week or so ago. So I may have to cheat, and we'll go, for the purposes of the video, we'll just assume that's sparkling clean. And it's just good old bit of scrubbing, really. Actually, that's come out a little bit easier than I thought, which is always good, isn't it? Yeah, that's not too bad actually. I'm quite happy with that. That's not perfect, but you know I'm going to say it. For the purposes of the video, we'll just assume that's sparkling clean. But on the whole, you can see I've made that all nice. And apart from the colour of the inside, where the original coat is starting to come out, that's pretty spot on. Right, so now it's got a little bit of residue down the bottom. I'm not totally happy with that. So with a bit of me posh cleaner, I'm just going to get in there. To be honest with you, this is a bit overdue for a really good clean, so it's going to take a little bit more effort than normal. If you keeping your airbrush in good condition, you're cleaning it out in between colours properly, and giving it a good regular clean like this. Each clean isn't really going to take that much effort. It's just because it's overdue for me. Right, so I want to start to put this back together again now. Now I like to do the most sensitive components first, so that means the nozzle, which is a little bit difficult to find at the moment because there's a tiny part floating around filthy dirty cleaner, but there it is. Right, so this piece of equipment, there's a bit of a debate with it. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Some people out there say it's actually horrible. What it is, it's a sharp point, but you'll see that round about near the top, can you see how some of it's been cut away? From about there onwards, it's cut in half. So you've got half a blade. And what that's designed for is to get inside here. And what you can do, can you see a little bit of it poking out the top? And what that's going to do is scrape away any gunk that's inside that nozzle. And look, can you see, even though I've cleaned that, there's gunk. Can you see that? And that's why I like it. Now some people argue that this is going to damage your nozzle, and that's fine. I will listen to them. I personally like to use this nozzle. And the reason I use that is because all my little tiny weeny brushes that everybody goes look at them, they're really cute. I can't see, I can get the brush in there and I can clean that out, but I can't get the brush all the way through, so I am reliant on this to get all my gunk out. And do you know what? I believe in karma. I did a run down to London the other day, and oddly the weather was beautiful in Scotland. As soon as we got over the English border, the weather was terrible until we got back to Scotland, and normally it's the other way around, isn't it? And yesterday I was like, ha ha ha, you English have got terrible weather, and us up in Scotland we've got beautiful weather, and it's now chucking it down with rain. So that is karma. Right, so I'm gonna technically do this wrong. I'm gonna put this nozzle back in. I'm actually gonna start it off by hand, but before I actually screw it in, I have this lube. Now I'm gonna be absolutely honest with you, I have no idea what's in this lube. I have no idea what happens if you don't use the iWater lube. So I use it, but I've had this for about 3 years, and the way that, actually that's an unopened one, because they did give me 2. I should have another one. There we go, I knew I had another one. So I use this little and often, and you can see, like, after 3 years, you see how much I've used. Hardly any. You don't need to do this on every single full strip down. I do. How much you use it is up to you. Now what I will do is, with this, because it's a tiny bit of thread, I put the tiniest amount on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this started off, and I'm going to screw that in. Okay, I'm going to screw it as far as I can by hand, and then I'm going to unscrew it a little bit. I say a little bit and I've ended up doing it, and I'm just going to screw that in and out just a few times, and that's just to spread that lube about. Don't know if you noticed how easy it was for me to unscrew everything, and that is simply because I do use plenty of lube, and that's what she said. So I'm going to finish doing this. Do not over tighten this, just do it enough, and just work that lube in so that I'm not happy with that. I think I might have just killed my airbrush. There we go, that's absolutely fine. Right, that's the needle back in. Sorry, that's the nozzle back in. Okay, so next we've got to try and reassemble this little jumble. So first thing I'm going to pop in is this part, and this wants to go in with this smaller part up. This is just for the trigger, because there'll be a spring on here. As you pull the handle back, the spring on here is going to push the handle forwards when you let go of it. So we just want to, I always push that forwards. We just want to pop that in so that it's just hanging backwards. And we've got a little bit of work here. We have the handle, and we see this little pin on the bottom. There's a pin where the air hose bit is. There's a little hole, and you need to get that pin in the hole, and I struggle to see, so I very rarely get it in first time. In fact, what I end up having to do, and I'm gonna you're not going to see this on camera, but I'm going to have to take my glasses off and look really close, and there we are, we're in. And we know when we're in because if we press, in fact I don't think that is in. No, that wasn't in. So I thought it was in, it felt like it was in, but when I do my little check to see it's in, and that bit's just fallen out, but that doesn't matter. The reason it doesn't matter, I've told you to put that in, and that's because on my Chinese airbrush you do need to get that in first, but it doesn't matter. So we've got our handle in, and we know we're in because, can you see there's a little pin there for the airbrush where the air hose comes in. When you push the handle, that pin's coming out down. Yeah, so we know that that handle's in. So next thing, we pop this in. So as I said before, just push that a little bit forwards, bring that in, push that against the handle. The next thing to pop in is the spring. I think it's the spring, I might be wrong here. Right, so spring is in, so be careful, we drop things, it's all going to go flying. So next we want this, I forget the names, so I'm not even going to go through them, but it's basically going to hold all of that in. So I'm going to get a little bit of lube onto there like that, and we look, there's one drop that I've used there, and we don't need to spread it around. When I first did this, I put lots of lube on, thinking there's not enough there. And what you need is one tiny bit. I'm going to screw that on about, like, see how easy that is. So I'm just going to screw it on and off a few times, and that's just to spread that lube about. Okay, backwards and forwards, and then once I'm confident that's going, we're going to do that all the way, and then that's just fallen out. Why is that? Yeah, there's a reason that's fallen out, and that's because the needle's not holding it in place. It's not a problem. We'll just backtrack and we'll do all of this again. So I've got to get this back in. Right, so it's okay, it enables me to give you a recap. So trigger is going in, there's a hole in there, I don't know if you can see it. I know the camera's not really that good at picking things up, so I've got to feed that in, and I think this trigger is probably the only really complex bit, and its gravity is your best friend, really, to be honest with you. If you can hold that level and let that swing, you could put a bit of lube in there as well if you wanted. I don't think it needs it, but just you have to make sure that drops into the hole. If you start moving things at an angle, there we go, that's gone in. Then this goes in like so. We've got the spring, and then we've got this, and that's going to screw on nicely like that, and we're going to remember not to pull that trigger. So next thing I'm going to pop in is the needle, and that will hold the trigger in. There's a hole going through the middle of the trigger, so once you put that needle in, it goes through the middle and it'll stop the trigger from falling out. So we've got a little hole at the back there. Gently we're going to push this through because it might not be lined up all the way through. So in fact this actually isn't. That never does this. Never ever ever does this. So perhaps I've done this one the wrong way around. Right, so let's take, there we go. Right, so right, I'm going to put the needle into there, and then we're going to feed that through. See what the problem is? I've actually put, can you believe I've put the trigger the wrong way around? So I put the trigger in that way. I should actually put it in that way. You see where the gap is? And that's where all my problems were. So guys, I'm sorry, I told you the wrong way to do things. So that's the trigger in, and that's the trigger in properly. So I'll do this the way I did it before then. So this part goes in. So for the third time this part goes in. Then the spring goes on the end. And then this goes in. And it's still going nicely because of that lube. Excuse me. But that just underlines why we don't force this needle in. We need to pop this needle in gently. There we go, it's going through now. Now you'll see that because we've put the needle in first, focus, you're going to see that when the needle reaches the end, you're going to just see a very tiny bit poke out the end. There, do you see it? See it disappear, and then out it comes. So what we're going to do is just gently push the needle as far as it will go, then we can get this cap on the end. And again, I want a little bit of lube on there. Anything with a thread I tend to lube. Just keeps things running smoothly, and in order to spread that lube, we put the cap on, we take it off about 2 or 3 times, and that should spread that nicely. So with that loose, make sure that needle's all the way. We tighten up. Now we can check the operation. So do you see how that needle's being pulled back when we pull the trigger, and when we let go of the trigger, it's gone back. So we know that's all working properly. So that's looking pretty sweet. So we might as well put the handle on now. Again, lube it if you want to. It just, all the lube does is just gives it a nice smooth operation. Ooh. There we go, that's very, very nice. Now, because we've been playing with lube, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another piece of kitchen roll. Just going to put a little bit of the thinners on here. Don't need a lot. Just going to give that a bit of a polish, just to get all the grease off. There you go. And then we have an airbrush, almost an airbrush, that I could play guess how old my airbrush is. I think that still looks pretty new. So still 2 more components that we want to add on. See if I can find my tweezers. I'm going to put the cap on the... There we go. So we've got our 2 pieces of nozzle, and you've already seen me clean these because in the previous video I had a little bit of an airbrush clog. So cotton bud, just get in there and clean in there. Most of the work has been done for you because it's been sat in soak, but we'll just run our cotton bud all around. That's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And this is the clean that most people will claim you do it every day. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't do it every day. Most times I just cheat, but I like to try and do it at least every 2 or 3 hobby days. Right, so same as before, tiny bit of lube. I say, you know, how long I've had this airbrush, and you can see how much lube I've used. You know, it's because I use very, very little, not because I don't use it, it's because I do use it very, very little. You really don't need a lot of lube, you just need a tiny, tiny thin layer. If you put a lot on there, all it's going to do is it's all going to squeeze out, it's going to make a mess everywhere. And this last one, I don't even squeeze it, I just rub it, and I don't even do it every time anyway. I think this one's not quite so important. So on and off, and then with our thinner infused kitchen roll, just give that a bit of a wipe, and there we go, guys. We have got an airbrush that is, well, apart from the fact I missed a bit there and I missed a bit there, but we have an airbrush that is ready to go. So what you might like to do at this point, again, this is an optional thing, but we want to just check the operation of it. So I'll get my spray out pot, and I'm going to fill that up with water, and I'm going to completely fill the cap up. This is just to check it, and it doesn't work, so I haven't got the compressor on. And that's flowing through rather quickly. if it will go through really quickly on full trigger, you know that's as clean as it can be. If it's you know, it's an obvious thing to say once you say it, but if that's half clogged, it's going to take twice as long to go through. If it's almost completely clogged, it's going to take absolutely ages to go through. But there you go, guys. So that is my airbrush nice and clean. I've shown you two ways to clean it. One is a quick battle clean, and the other one is a full strip down. So when doing a battle clean, and I'll always do a battle clean even if I do a full clean, we want to do number one, water, just to flush out most of the paint in the cheapest way possible. Thinners, which is an effective way of getting some of that paint out. It will actually mix with the paint and then most of that will go through. Then we've got a cleaner, which is going to do most of the hard work. Then we want to just flush it through with a little bit of thinner. The thinner will get rid of the cleaner. If it's then not very clean still, we'll get another one with a cleaner, or maybe another one with the thinners. If it's still not clean, we'll call in the cavalry with our commercial airbrush cleaner. Obviously, if you're using a commercial airbrush cleaner instead of your own thinners, then you know, but you probably will be fine. Although I don't think this is any worse than some of the commercial cleaners out there. Once you've done the thinners, you're then going to flush it through water to get rid of the thinners, so that when you do use a new paint, it's not going to affect that new paint. Right, guys, so let's go over to front camera. Hello, guys. So next week, we now need to... this is obviously the end of my airbrush series for June. I hope this has really helped you. You know, if in May you were thinking, oh, I'm really not sure about an airbrush, I hope you can now go into July deciding whether or not you actually want an airbrush. Next week's video is going to sound a little bit odd because we've already done airbrushing with primers and airbrushing with paints. But I'm actually going to do a full intro on paints and primers. I'm going to look at brush primers, of which there aren't many. It's not something that is a very big market. We're going to look at my primers again. We're going to look at paints at a very basic level. And then what we're going to do is hopefully the week after we're going to paint some parts. So I have some parts that need painting, so we'll get those painted. Now what I've decided on this series is, at the moment, I'm only going to be dealing with acrylics. Acrylics is what I deal with 99% of the time, and I think probably at least 99% of painters use acrylics either in part or purely just use acrylics. You know, you'll find some people might mix enamels and acrylics, not together while they're wet, obviously, but they will still use acrylics. Some of the basics of acrylics can also be applied to enamels, but I'm going to be dealing with acrylics. I will cover various subjects later on, but it's a big long tick list of absolute basics that I need to cover before I can move on to the advanced. And some of the advanced I actually need to learn before I can show you. Yeah, so as I say, it's you know, I'm running the risk at the moment where if I show you one thing, it might be confusing because you don't know some other element of it. But if I show you that other element, then you don't know this element. So it's kind of two things, and it's quite the hardest bit is knowing what order to do things. So what I've said quite often, which still applies, which is if you have anything specific you would like me to cover, and be as specific as you would like, I will certainly look into fitting that at some point. I've had some really good suggestions from people, which I will be covering. You know, it kind of made me think that this hobby, all these tips and cheats that I'm giving you, it's not always about the physical. One of the suggestions that I've had is dealing with painter's block, dealing with when things go wrong, losing your mojo. Depression is something that a lot of people mention, and I've seen it so many times. Oh, I haven't done any painting this week because I've been rather depressed. And that's a difficult subject because depression for me means something completely different for you, but it's still a factor in painting. Tidying up, things like that. These are all subjects that need covering. I have a big massive list somewhere, which is a rule that I inadvertently tried to follow anyway. And it's 10 rules for the workbench stroke woodworking shop stroke hobby area, and it covers things like giving everything a home, which is something that I've changed everything recently. So by having things in a different place, it's quite confusing. I'll go for something and I'll go, oh, it's not there anymore, it's over there. So there's things like that that are important. Keeping things that you use a lot close to you. I have things kept under here that I don't use very often, and I have these I keep up here, but what I do is I know I use them for practically every build. So at the start of the build they come out, but in the end they get tidied away and put down there. Yes, I do tidy them up sometimes. Yeah, and so what tends to happen is I will have a nice clear desk to start with, and then as I work the desk gets messier and messier. So there's another factor there that I need to stop, say 15 minutes earlier, just so I can have a little bit of a tidy up. So let's say anything you want to cover. One thing I will go through tomorrow, where I do intros to paints and primers, I will be covering some different colours on a basic terms. By that I mean some colours, like, so black, if you want to lighten black you add white, but some colours such as red, if you were to add white to them you actually get pink, which is not the colour that you're going for. So what you do with red is you lighten it with yellow and it makes it a little bit more orange. So whereas a brighter black is grey, a brighter red is orange. So there's just a couple of little tips there, and the same with greens. Greens, if you add a white it goes pastel, if you add a grey or a black it goes drab. Whereas if you actually want to lighten the colour you need to go through the colour spectrum. But these are things that I'm going to cover next week, so I hope you will catch me next week. Let's say I'll be doing introduction to paints and primers, followed by painting parts. So yeah guys, take care and I will see you in the next week. Bye bye.